The pre-dawn darkness over Los Angeles International Airport was pierced by the amber glow of runway lights, stretching into the distance like strings of jewels. Captain Sarah Chen walked through the quiet terminal, her rolling suitcase clicking rhythmically behind her, her pilot's uniform crisp and professional. At 42 years old, she had the kind of confidence that came not from arrogance, but from 10,000 hours of knowing exactly what she was doing. Gate 47 was already buzzing with early morning activity. Passengers lined up, clutching coffee cups and boarding passes, most of them bleary-eyed and impatient to get to New York. Sarah passed them without a glance, her ID badge granting her access through the crew door. None of them looked up. None of them wondered about the woman who would hold their lives in her hands for the next 5 hours. Inside the cockpit of Transcontinental Airlines Flight 2847, Sarah found her co-pilot already running through the preliminary checks. Jake Martinez was 28, eager, competent, and exactly the kind of by-the-book aviator the airlines loved. He looked up as she entered, his face breaking into an easy smile. "Morning, Captain. Beautiful day for flying." "That it is, Jake." Sarah settled into the left seat, the captain's seat, and the cockpit immediately felt like home. The Boeing 767 was her office now, her sanctuary. So different from the cramped, weapons-laden cockpit of an FA-18 Super Hornet, yet somehow the same where it mattered. Both required absolute precision. Both demanded respect. She began her checks with practiced efficiency. Overhead panel, flight instruments, navigation systems, fuel quantity. Her hands moved with a grace that spoke of muscle memory, of thousands of flights, of something deeper that Jake couldn't quite identify. There was something about Captain Chen that made even veteran pilots feel like students. "How's the wedding planning coming?" Sarah asked, her eyes never leaving the instruments as she worked through the checklist. Jake groaned good-naturedly. "My fiancé has me sampling cakes this weekend. Apparently, there's a difference between champagne vanilla and French vanilla. Who knew?" Sarah smiled. "Trust me, Jake, just agree with everything she says. That's the secret to a happy marriage." Speaking from experience. Speaking from watching my parents celebrate their 40th anniversary last month. She made a notation on her flight plan. "My father's philosophy has always been yes, dear, and you're absolutely right, honey. Seems to work." As Jake laughed, he noticed Sarah's flight bag tucked beside her seat. The zipper was partially open, and a corner of a photograph peeked out. The colors faded, the edges worn from being handled too many times. Jake had seen it before and been curious, but Sarah Chen was intensely private about her past. "Captain," he ventured carefully, "that photo in your bag, is that you in a military uniform?" Sarah's hands paused for just a fraction of a second on the overhead panel. Most people wouldn't have noticed, but Jake did. Then she continued her checks as if nothing had happened. "Long time ago," she said simply. "Navy." "Yes." "Did you fly?" Sarah turned to look at him then, and Jake saw something in her eyes, something vast and deep, like looking into the ocean and sensing the mysteries beneath. "I did." "Fighters?" She nodded once, then returned to her checklist. The conversation was clearly over, but Jake's curiosity burned. He'd been flying with Captain Chen for 6 months now, and she was unlike any pilot he'd ever known. She had an almost supernatural awareness of the aircraft, could feel things in the controls that others couldn't, made decisions with a speed and accuracy that bordered on precognition. What Jake didn't know, what almost no one knew, was that the woman sitting beside him was a legend in naval aviation circles. Lieutenant Commander Sarah "Viper" Chen. Call sign earned not through some macho nickname tradition but through sheer skill. She struck fast, struck hard, and never missed. 15 years of service. 2 combat deployments. Over 800 carrier landings, including 127 night traps, landing a supersonic fighter jet on a moving aircraft carrier deck, in complete darkness, with nothing but instruments and nerve. She'd flown close air support missions over hostile territory, had brought damaged aircraft home when others would have ejected, and had earned the respect of every pilot who'd ever flown with her. The photograph Jake had glimpsed showed a younger Sarah standing before her FA-18, helmet tucked under her arm, the sun setting behind her, and the USS John C. Stennis. That photo was taken the day after she'd landed a crippled Hornet with partial hydraulic failure, battle damage from ground fire, and one engine running rough. She'd brought it aboard on the first pass, catching the 3-wire like it was a routine Tuesday. They'd called her Viper after that mission. The nickname stuck, the legend grew. But that was another lifetime. 5 years ago, Sarah had made the hardest decision of her life. She'd walked away. Not because she couldn't hack it, not because she'd lost her edge. She walked away because carrier aviation was a young person's game, because the constant deployments were exhausting, because she wanted something resembling a normal life. Transcontinental Airlines had welcomed her with open arms. Former military pilots were prized for their discipline and skill. But Sarah never told war stories, never wore her past like a medal, never mentioned the call sign that once struck respect into the hearts of enemy pilots and pride into her squadron mates. She was just Captain Chen now, reliable, professional, punctual. Ordinary. Transcon 2847, you're cleared for pushback. The ground controller's voice crackled through the headset. Cleared for pushback, Transcon 2847, Jake responded. The boarding door closed with a solid thunk. Sarah glanced at the passenger count on her display. 164 souls on board, plus 6 crew members. 170 lives. She'd protected lives before, flying combat air patrols, escorting strike packages, putting herself between danger and those who couldn't defend themselves. But this was different. These were families, children, people going about their ordinary lives who'd placed their trust in her without knowing her name. As the tug pushed them back from the gate, Sarah performed a final scan of her instruments. Everything was perfect. Weather was good. Aircraft was in excellent condition. It was going to be a routine flight. "Ladies and gentlemen, this is your captain speaking," Sarah said into the PA system, her voice warm and confident. "Welcome aboard Transcontinental Flight 2847 with service to New York JFK. Flight time today will be approximately 5 hours. We're expecting smooth air and good weather. Sit back, relax, and we'll have you in New York before you know it." She replaced the microphone and shared a smile with Jake. "Ready." "Ready, Captain." Neither of them knew that in exactly 2 hours and 17 minutes, Captain Sarah Chen would face the greatest challenge of her aviation career. Neither knew that her 15 years of military training, her legendary skills, and every lesson learned in the crucible of naval aviation would be tested beyond anything she'd experienced. Neither knew that the ordinary Tuesday morning was about to become anything but ordinary. The Boeing 767 taxied toward the runway, just another silver bird in an endless parade of flights. But at its controls sat a legend, even if no one knew it yet. Sarah Chen, call sign Viper, was about to fly again. For real, the flight had been perfect, almost boringly so. Flight 2847 climbed smoothly through the morning sky, leaving the sprawling expanse of Los Angeles behind. Sarah leveled off at their cruising altitude of 30,000 feet, the autopilot engaged, the engines humming with their familiar, reassuring drone. Below them, the patchwork of California's Central Valley gave way to the stark beauty of the Nevada desert, then the Rocky Mountains painted in shades of brown and white. Jake was eating a sandwich the flight attendants had brought up, scrolling through wedding venues on his tablet during his break. Sarah sipped her coffee, monitoring the instruments with the casual vigilance of someone who'd done this 10,000 times. The sun streamed through the cockpit windows, warm and pleasant. In the cabin, passengers were settling into their routines. Business travelers typed on laptops. Parents read stories to restless children. A youth soccer team from San Diego, 12 kids aged 10 to 12, chattered excitedly about the national championship tournament in New York. Their coach, Miguel Torres, was already regretting not booking them on separate flights for the sake of everyone's sanity. Lead flight attendant Maria Rodriguez moved through the aisles with practiced grace, collecting drink cups and offering extra snacks. She'd been flying for 18 years and could read a cabin like a book. Today's passengers were relaxed, content, easy flight. She smiled at a little girl clutching a stuffed elephant, then headed back toward the galley. It was 9:47 a.m. Mountain Time when Sarah's world changed. The first warning was almost gentle, a single amber light on the hydraulic system panel. System B hydraulic pressure low. Sarah's eyes flicked to it immediately, her brain processing. Not critical. They had 3 independent hydraulic systems for exactly this reason. Redundancy. Safety. "Jake, I've got a system B hydraulic caution," she said calmly, reaching for the quick reference handbook. Jake looked up from his tablet, suddenly alert. "Roger, I see it." He leaned forward, scanning the other instruments. Pressure's dropping, quantity's still good though. Sarah's fingers moved across the overhead panel, isolating the system, running through the checklist. "Probably a pump issue. We'll run on A and C, let's notify dispatch and..." The second warning light blazed red. System A hydraulic pressure, 0. Sarah's stomach tightened, but her voice remained steady. "System A just failed." "What?" Jake's voice cracked slightly. "2 systems, that's..." "I know." Sarah was already reaching for the radio. "Kansas City Center, Transcon 2847, we're experiencing hydraulic issues, requesting..." The third light turned red. "System C hydraulic failure." For a moment time seemed to stop. Sarah stared at the panel, her mind refusing to accept what her eyes were seeing. All 3 hydraulic systems. Gone, simultaneously. It was statistically impossible. Modern aircraft didn't fail like this. Couldn't fail like this. That's what the engineers promised. That's what the safety statistics proved. But the lights didn't lie. "Oh my God," Jake whispered. "Sarah, we've lost everything." The aircraft lurched, a sickening yaw to the right. Sarah's hands flew to the control yoke, pulling it, but it was like moving through molasses. The flight control surfaces, ailerons, elevators, rudder, all operated by hydraulic pressure. Without it, they were nearly useless. The massive Boeing 767, weighing 160,000 pounds, was essentially flying with no controls. "Kansas City Center, Transcon 2847, emergency. We have complete hydraulic system failure, all 3 systems, losing control authority." Sarah's voice was urgent but controlled, even as the aircraft began rolling left. The air traffic controller's voice came back, tight with shock. "Transcon 2847, say again. Did you say complete hydraulic failure?" "Affirmative, Kansas City. All 3 systems are showing 0 pressure. We have minimal flight control response. Declaring emergency." In the cabin, passengers felt the violent motion. The aircraft was wallowing, rolling one way then overcorrecting the other. Drinks spilled. Carry-on bags shifted in overhead bins. The little girl with the stuffed elephant started crying. Her mother held her tight, staring out the window at the wing, which was dipping and rising in a sickeningly unnatural rhythm. The soccer team's excited chatter died instantly. 12 pairs of young eyes went wide with fear. "Ladies and gentlemen, this is the captain." Sarah forced her voice to remain calm over the PA. "We're experiencing some technical difficulties. Please return to your seats immediately and fasten your seatbelts securely. Flight attendants, prepare the cabin for possible emergency landing." Maria's professional mask slipped for just a second when she heard those words. Possible emergency landing. In 28 years of flying, she'd never heard a captain say those words. She grabbed the intercom. "All flight attendants, emergency stations. You know the drill." Back in the cockpit, Sarah was fighting. Her right hand gripped the control yoke, useless now, while her left moved to the throttle quadrant. 4 engines. 4 independent thrust levers. If hydraulics wouldn't work, maybe thrust would. It was a technique she'd learned in the Navy, practicing in simulators, studying the legendary cases. United 232 in Sioux City, where the crew had flown a DC-10 using only engine thrust after losing hydraulics. They'd saved 185 lives. They'd also lost 111, but they'd done the impossible. Sarah pushed the right throttles forward, pulling the left ones back. Asymmetric thrust. The aircraft began to respond, slowly turning. It was like steering a cruise ship with a canoe paddle, but it was something. "Jake, I need you to work the radios. Get me everything. Weather at every airport within 200 miles, runway lengths, emergency services. And get me military assistance if possible." "Military?" Jake looked at her, confused even through his panic. "Just do it," Sarah snapped, then softened. "Trust me, I need experienced pilots who understand what I'm trying to do." She pushed the left throttles forward again, and the aircraft's nose came up slightly. A bead of sweat ran down her temple. The yoke in her hands was dead weight, but the throttles were alive. They were her only connection to this dying aircraft. The Boeing rolled right again, more aggressively this time. Passengers screamed. Sarah caught it with thrust, her movements becoming more instinctive, feeling her way through the impossible physics of flying a jetliner with no flight controls. Her mind flashed back to a night 15 years ago, aboard the USS John C. Stennis. She'd been flying her FA-18 back to the carrier when she'd taken ground fire over Iraq. Hydraulics failing, one engine running rough, the ship pitching in heavy seas. She'd nursed that wounded Hornet back, landed it on a moving deck in the dark, and walked away. They'd called her Viper after that. Now she needed to be Viper again. "Kansas City, Transcon 2847, she transmitted, her voice carrying an edge of steel that made the controller sit up straighter. "I'm taking this aircraft to 35,000 feet. I need to burn off fuel, and I need time to work out a solution. Clear all traffic from my path. I'm going to be maneuvering unpredictably." "Transcon 2847, Roger. Understand you're climbing to flight level 350. All traffic is being vectored away. What are your intentions?" Sarah looked at the fuel gauge, too heavy to land safely. She looked at Jake's pale face. She thought of the 164 souls behind her, the soccer kids, the families, the business travelers who'd complained about the coffee. All of them depending on her. "Kansas City, my intention is to land this aircraft safely. I just need to figure out how." She pushed the throttles forward, and the wounded Boeing began to climb into the crystal blue sky, escorted by prayers and held aloft by nothing but thrust and the will of a woman who'd once been a legend, who was about to become one again. 35,000 feet above Kansas, Captain Sarah Chen was performing a feat that most pilots would consider impossible. She was flying a 160,000-pound commercial jetliner using nothing but engine thrust, and she was doing it with a precision that bordered on supernatural. The Boeing 767 wanted to die. Every aerodynamic principle, every engineering calculation, every safety manual said that an aircraft without hydraulics should be unflyable. The control yoke in her hands was merely decorative now, connected to nothing, capable of nothing. Yet somehow, through microscopic adjustments of the 4 throttle levers, Sarah was keeping the massive jet relatively stable. Her right hand rested on the throttles, fingers making constant tiny movements. Add power to engine 3, reduce power on engine 1, balance with 2 and 4. The aircraft would start to roll left, she'd catch it. Nose dropping, she'd add power symmetrically to all 4 engines, creating just enough lift to bring it back up. It was like juggling chainsaws while riding a unicycle on a tightrope. In a hurricane. Blindfolded. "How are you doing that?" Jake whispered, watching her hands dance across the throttle quadrant. The simulator never, they never taught us. They don't teach this in civilian aviation, Sarah replied, her eyes fixed on the artificial horizon. The instrument was showing a 2-degree right bank. She adjusted. This is old-school test pilot stuff, differential thrust technique. I learned it a long time ago. Where? Sarah glanced at him, and Jake saw something in her eyes he'd never seen before. Not fear, but a fierce, burning determination that made him understand why she'd been in that fighter jet in the photograph. Navy Test Pilot School, Patuxent River, Maryland, class of 2009. Jake's mouth fell open. You were a test pilot. Among other things. Sarah's attention snapped back to the instruments. The aircraft was trying to pitch nose down. She added power. Jake, I need you to focus. Pull up the weather for every airport within 300 miles. I need runway length, wind conditions, and I need to know which one has the best emergency services. On it, Jake's fingers flew across the flight management computer, but his mind was reeling. A test pilot. The Navy only selected the absolute best pilots for test pilot school. That meant Captain Sarah Chen wasn't just good, she was elite. In the cabin, the reality of the situation was sinking in. The oxygen masks had deployed 10 minutes ago during a particularly violent maneuver, hanging like deflated ghosts above every seat. Flight attendant Maria Rodriguez moved through the aisles with forced calm, checking that passengers had their seatbelts secured, helping an elderly woman with her mask, speaking in soothing tones that contradicted the terror in her own heart. The soccer team had gone completely silent. 12 kids who'd been bouncing with excitement an hour ago now sat rigid, holding hands across the aisle. Their coach, Miguel Torres, tried to keep his voice steady. It's going to be okay, guys. The pilot knows what she's doing. But Miguel didn't believe his own words. The aircraft was moving wrong, rolling, pitching, movements that no commercial jet should ever make. Through the window, he could see the wing tilting at angles that made his stomach lurch. A businessman named Robert Chen, no relation to the captain, was quietly typing a message to his wife on his phone while he still had signal. Something's wrong with the plane. I love you. Tell the kids I love them. His finger hovered over the send button. He couldn't bring himself to press it. Pressing it would make it real. In seat 23C, a nurse named Patricia Williams watched the flight attendants' faces. She'd worked in emergency rooms for 25 years. She could read fear behind professional masks. Whatever was happening in that cockpit, it was bad, really bad. She reached over and took her husband's hand, squeezing hard. The little girl with the stuffed elephant, Emily Richardson, age 6, looked up at her mother. Mommy, are we going to crash? Her mother, Jennifer, pulled her daughter close, tears streaming down her face. No, baby, no. The pilot is going to take care of us. Back in the cockpit, Sarah was doing exactly that, taking care of them. But it was the hardest thing she'd ever done. Jake, talk to me. What do we have? Jake pulled himself together, reading from the screen. Okay, within range we've got. Denver International is 200 miles west, but they're reporting crosswinds at 25 knots. Wichita Mid-Continent is 40 miles south, runway 9,000 feet. Lincoln Airport in Nebraska is 120 miles northeast. They've got a 12,900-foot runway, former Strategic Air Command base. Sarah's mind calculated instantly. Wichita was closer, but 9,000 feet wasn't enough. Not for an aircraft she could barely control, landing too heavy with fuel, no hydraulic brakes. She'd use every inch of runway and probably run off the end. Lincoln, the old SAC base, built for B-52 bombers in the Cold War. That long runway was built for emergencies. Lincoln, she decided, set it up. And Jake, I need you to contact the Air National Guard. Tell them we need fighter escort. Fighter escort, why? Because I need eyes I can trust. Sarah's voice was tight with concentration as she caught another roll with differential thrust. When I make my approach, I'll have no way to know if my landing gear is actually down and locked. The hydraulic indicators are dead. I'll need visual confirmation from pilots who know what they're looking at." Jake stared at her with new understanding. "You've done this before, not in a 767, but you've actually flown an aircraft without hydraulics before." Sarah allowed herself a grim smile. An F/A-18 Super Hornet got shot up over Iraq in 2012, lost primary and secondary hydraulics, had about 20% of normal flight control, made it back to the carrier. She paused, remembering that night. The darkness, the fear, the impossible landing. Scared the hell out of me then. Scares the hell out of me now. "But you made it." "I made it." She adjusted the throttles again, keeping the nose up. "That was a 23-ton fighter jet. This is an 80-ton transport. The physics are different, the margins are smaller, but the principle is the same. You don't give up. You fly the aircraft until it stops moving or you're safely on the ground." "Kansas City Center, Transcon 2847, Jake transmitted. "We need immediate contact with any Air National Guard or military aviation assets. We're going to need fighter escort for visual confirmation during landing." There was a pause. Then the controller's voice came back, professional but clearly shaken. "Transcon 2847, Kansas City. Stand by. We're contacting the 184th Fighter Wing out of McConnell Air Force Base. They're scrambling assets now." Sarah felt a surge of relief. Fighter pilots. Real stick-and-rudder aviators who'd understand what she was trying to do, who'd flown with one hand on the stick and the other on the throttle, who knew that sometimes flying was more art than science. "ETA to Lincoln?" she asked Jake. "At our current speed and with the course corrections, about 45 minutes. 45 minutes. Sarah looked at the fuel quantity, still too heavy. She needed to burn more, needed to get lighter, needed every advantage she could create. She also needed a miracle. But Sarah Chen, call sign Viper, had never been one to wait for miracles. She'd always made her own. "All right," she said, more to herself than to Jake. "Let's teach this bus some new tricks." Her hands moved on the throttles, and the crippled Boeing responded, slowly, grudgingly, but it responded. In the cabin, passengers held their breath. In towers across 3 states, controllers watched their radar screens in horrified fascination. And somewhere over Nebraska, 2 F-35 Lightning II fighter jets thundered into the sky, racing to intercept a commercial airliner that should have been falling from the sky, but somehow, impossibly, was still flying. All because of a woman with steady hands and a legendary call sign. The hunt was on, the rescue was coming. And Sarah Chen was just getting started. The voice that came through Sarah's headset was crisp, authoritative, and unmistakably military. "Transcon 2847, this is Colonel James Matthews, 184th Fighter Wing Operations. We're launching 2 F-35s to your position. ETA approximately 12 minutes. Can you give me a detailed assessment of your situation?" Sarah's response was immediate, her tone shifting into something Jake had never heard before, pure military precision. "Colonel Matthews, Transcon 2847. We have complete hydraulic failure across all 3 independent systems. Cause unknown. Aircraft is controllable using differential thrust only. I'm maintaining altitude at flight level 350, burning fuel to reduce landing weight. Current souls on board, 170. Fuel remaining, approximately 2.3 hours at current consumption." There was a brief pause. When Colonel Matthews spoke again, his tone had changed. "Transcon, your radio discipline is exceptional. What's your aviation background?" "Navy Colonel, 15 years. Carrier-based strike fighter pilot, VFA 213 Black Lions. Last assignment was test pilot at Patuxent River." The pause was longer this time. Jake watched Sarah's face, seeing a transformation. The friendly, approachable captain he'd been flying with for 6 months was gone. In her place sat a warrior, focused, deadly serious, radiating competence. Copy that, Transcon. Ma'am, I'm going to be frank with you. What you're attempting is nearly impossible. The success rate for differential thrust landings in aircraft this size is— I'm aware of the statistics, Colonel, Sarah interrupted calmly. I'm also aware that United 232 in Sioux City managed to get a DC-10 on the ground using this technique. They saved 185 people. I intend to save all 170. United 232 also lost 111 people in the crash landing, Matthews replied carefully. Then I'll have to do better than they did. Sarah's voice carried absolute conviction. Colonel, here's what I need. When your fighters arrive, I need them positioned where they can give me continuous visual updates on my aircraft attitude and flight control surface positions. I have no hydraulic pressure indicators, so I don't know if my gear will actually extend and lock when I try to lower it. I need eyes I can trust. Understood. My lead pilot is Major David Thornton, call sign Hammer. 20 years experience, combat veteran, former Top Gun instructor. His wingman is Captain Lisa Williams, call sign Torch. Both highly qualified. They'll be your eyes. Perfect. I also need approach priority into Lincoln Airport. I want the longest runway, all emergency equipment staged, and a clear approach path. No other traffic within 10 miles of my pattern. Already in the works, Transcon. Lincoln is shutting down all other operations. You'll have the entire airport to yourself. Jake was staring at Sarah with something approaching awe. This wasn't the woman who'd chatted with him about wedding cakes 2 hours ago. This was someone else entirely, someone who spoke the language of combat aviation fluently, who gave orders to colonels, who planned impossible landings like they were routine. Captain, Jake said quietly, who are you really? Sarah glanced at him, and for a moment her expression softened. The same person I've always been, Jake. I just left some parts of myself behind when I left the Navy. Guess they're coming back now. She returned her attention to the throttles, making another microscopic adjustment. The aircraft had been trying to enter a slight descent. She caught it, brought the nose back up. Her hands moved with a fluidity that seemed almost choreographed. How long did you fly fighters? Jake asked. 12 years operational, 3 years as a test pilot. I had over 800 carrier landings, 127 night traps. She paused. You know what a night trap is? Jake shook his head. Landing on an aircraft carrier at night. The ship is moving, the deck is pitching in the waves, and you're bringing a $30 million fighter jet aboard in complete darkness. The deck is only about 300 feet long. You've got to catch one of 4 arresting wires with a hook on your tail. Miss all 4, you go to full power and try again. Miss the deck entirely. She didn't finish the sentence. That sounds terrifying. It is, every single time, but that's the job. You train until the impossible becomes routine. Sarah checked her fuel gauge again. I once landed with battle damage, partial hydraulics, and 1 engine running rough. In a storm, at night, made it aboard on the first pass. Is that when they gave you your call sign? Sarah smiled slightly. You heard that, huh? Yeah, Viper. They said I struck fast and never missed. Why did you leave? The question hung in the air. Sarah was quiet for a long moment, her eyes distant. Because carrier aviation is a young person's game. Because I was tired of 6-month deployments. Because I wanted to sleep in the same bed for more than a few weeks at a time. She adjusted the throttles again. And because I'd used up all my luck. Every pilot has a finite amount of luck. I knew mine was running out, so I walked away while I still could. Do you miss it? Every single day. The admission was soft, almost painful. I dream about it. The catapult launch, the G-forces, the absolute freedom of flying a fighter jet. Nothing in civilian aviation compares to that feeling. She looked at Jake directly. But I also like being alive. I like that you're getting married next month. I like that those kids in the back are going to play in a soccer tournament. That's worth more than adrenaline. The radio crackled. Transcon 2847, this is Thunder 1. We have you on radar. ETA to visual contact is 6 minutes. How are you holding up? Sarah keyed the mic. Thunder 1, Transcon 2847, holding steady. Aircraft is controllable but requires constant attention. I'm ready for your visual assessment when you arrive. Roger that, Transcon. Thunder flight is rolling in hot. We'll get you home safe. In the cabin, flight attendant Maria had made her way to the soccer team. The kids were still holding hands, their faces pale but brave. Coach Torres was leading them in breathing exercises, trying to keep them calm. Is the pilot really going to save us? One boy asked, his voice small. Maria knelt down, looking at their young faces. She thought about the captain's calm voice on the intercom, the absolute confidence in every word. Something about that voice made her believe the impossible might be possible. Yes, she said firmly, she is. I don't know how, but she is. A little girl raised her hand like she was in class. Is the pilot a lady? Yes, honey, Captain Chen. She's flying this plane. Cool, the girl said. My dad says ladies can't fly planes good. Maria smiled despite the terror in her heart. Well, honey, your dad is wrong. Captain Chen is about to prove just how wrong. Back in the cockpit, Sarah was performing a mental checklist. Fuel burn rate good. Aircraft stability as good as could be expected. Weather at Lincoln clear and calm. Emergency services standing by. Everything was falling into place. Everything except the landing itself. That was going to require every ounce of skill she possessed, every lesson learned in 15 years of flying, every instinct honed through thousands of hours of training. Jake, she said quietly, I want you to know something. If this doesn't work out the way I'm planning, it won't be because we didn't try. It won't be because we gave up. Sometimes, even when you do everything right, the physics just don't cooperate. Don't talk like that, Captain. I'm being realistic, but I'm also telling you this. I'm not planning to fail. I'm going to land this aircraft. Those people back there are going home to their families. That soccer team is going to their tournament. You're going to marry your fiancé and argue about cake flavors. Her voice was steel. I've beaten worse odds than this, and I've never failed a mission yet. Never. Sarah's smile was fierce, predatory, the smile of a fighter pilot who'd earned her call sign through blood and skill and sheer determination. Never. Two F-35 Lightning IIs were screaming across the sky toward them, two of the most advanced fighter jets ever built, flown by two of the best pilots in the Air Force. But right now, the most dangerous pilot in the sky was flying a crippled Boeing 767 with nothing but throttles and attitude. Call sign Viper. And she was about to strike. Major David Hammer Thornton pushed his F-35 Lightning II through the crystalline blue sky at 580 knots. His wingman captain Lisa Torch, Williams locked in perfect formation off his right wing. Below them, the Nebraska farmland spread out like a patchwork quilt, peaceful and serene, completely at odds with the life-or-death drama unfolding at 35,000 feet. Thunder 2, you picking up the target on radar? Hammer asked. Affirmative, Thunder 1. Bearing 035, range 40 miles, altitude 35,000. Transponder squawking 7700. Torch's voice was calm, professional. The emergency squawk code meant everyone in the sky knew Transcon 2847 was in serious trouble. Let's go say hello. Thunder flight, tactical spread, come left to heading 035. The two F-35s banked in perfect unison, their afterburners leaving twin contrails across the morning sky. Hammer had flown combat missions over Syria, Iraq, and Afghanistan. He'd engaged enemy aircraft, dodged surface-to-air missiles, and landed on damaged runways under fire. But something about this mission made his chest tight with anxiety. A civilian airliner with no hydraulics, nearly 200 souls on board, A pilot attempting the nearly impossible using techniques that had failed more often than they'd succeeded. Thunder 1, Transcon 2847 is now visual 12 o'clock, 10 miles. His weapons systems officer called out. Hammer squinted through his helmet visor and saw it, a silver speck against the blue, but even from this distance, something was wrong. The aircraft was wallowing, its movements unnatural, like a wounded bird trying desperately to stay aloft. Thunder 2, you seeing this? Affirmative, that aircraft is barely under control. Look at those wing oscillations. Hammer keyed his radio. Transcon 2847, Thunder 1 has you visual. We're coming up on your right side for observation. How are you doing up there? The voice that answered was female, calm, and carried a precision that made Hammer sit up straighter in his ejection seat. Thunder 1, Transcon 2847. Good to see you, gentlemen. Recommend you take position high right, observation distance about 200 feet. I need continuous verbal updates on my flight control surface positions and aircraft attitude. I'm flying entirely on engine thrust. Hammer exchanged a glance with his flight computer display, impressed. This wasn't a panicked civilian pilot. This was someone who knew exactly what she needed and how to ask for it. Copy all, Transcon. We're coming alongside now. The F-35 pulled up beside the massive Boeing 767, and Hammer got his first good look at the stricken aircraft. What he saw made his blood run cold. The ailerons were drooping asymmetrically, the elevators were in strange positions, the rudder was canted at an odd angle. Nothing looked right. Yet somehow, impossibly, the aircraft was flying relatively straight and level. Transcon Thunder 1, I have visual on your aircraft. Your flight controls are, well, they're all over the place. How are you maintaining attitude? Pure thrust vectoring, Thunder 1. I'm using differential power on the 4 engines to control roll, pitch, and yaw. It's not elegant, but it's working. Hammer had heard of the technique, had practiced it once in a simulator, had crashed spectacularly. Ma'am, that's extraordinary flying. What's your aviation background? Military, Thunder 1, long time ago. Torch's voice came over the tactical frequency. Hammer, did you hear her terminology? Thrust vectoring, attitude control, observation distance. That's not civilian talk. That's fighter-pilot talk. I noticed. Hammer studied the Boeing's movements more carefully. Whoever was at the controls was making constant, tiny adjustments. The aircraft would start to roll, and before it became serious, power would shift, correcting it. It was like watching a tightrope walker, every movement calculated, every correction precise. Transcon 2847, Thunder 1, your control inputs are impressive, very smooth. What did you fly in the military? There was a brief pause. Carrier-based strike fighters, Thunder 1, FA-18 Super Hornets. Torch's excited voice burst over the tactical channel. Holy shit, Hammer, she flew Hornets off carriers. That's the big leagues. Hammer agreed. Navy carrier pilots were a breed apart. Landing on a moving postage stamp in the middle of the ocean required skills that most Air Force pilots could only dream about. Transcon, how many carrier traps do you have? Over 800, Thunder 1, including 127 night traps. Both F-35 pilots fell silent. 800 carrier landings was elite territory. 127 night traps was legendary. Ma'am, Hammer said respectfully, with that experience, if anyone can land this aircraft, it's you. What do you need from us? Thunder Flight, I'm starting my descent toward Lincoln in approximately 15 minutes. When I make my approach, I'll have no way to verify landing gear position. My hydraulic indicators are dead. I need visual confirmation that all gears are down and locked before I commit to landing. We can do that, Transcon. We'll be your eyes all the way down. Inside the Boeing's cockpit, Sarah allowed herself a small smile. She'd flown with Air Force pilots before during joint exercises. They were good, very good. Having them as escorts gave her something precious, reliable information from pilots who understood what she was attempting. Thunder 1, Transcon, one more thing. When I'm on final approach, I'll need constant updates on my sync rate and alignment. I won't be able to look at instruments much. I'll be flying by feel, watching the runway through the windscreen. You'll be my instruments. Understood. We'll call out everything you need to know. Jake was watching the two F-35s through the cockpit window, their sleek, aggressive profiles making the commercial Boeing look lumbering and clumsy by comparison. "Those are our guardian angels," he said quietly. "More than that," Sarah replied. "Those are professional aviators who speak my language. Having them out there." She paused, searching for words. "It's like having squadron mates again. I trust them." In the cabin, passengers had noticed the fighter jets. Some pointed, confused. Others understood immediately what it meant. The military didn't scramble fighters for routine problems. Young Emily Richardson pressed her face against the window, watching the sleek gray jet flying alongside. "Mommy, why are those planes here?" Her mother Jennifer held her daughter close, tears on her cheeks. "They're here to help us, baby. They're here to make sure we're safe." The soccer team had gathered at the windows, the kids momentarily distracted from their fear by the awesome sight of modern fighter jets. Coach Torres felt a spark of hope. If the military was here, if they'd sent their best aircraft and pilots, maybe, just maybe, they had a chance. Maria Rodriguez made her way back to the cockpit, using the interphone. "Captain, the passengers are asking about the fighter jets." Sarah's voice came back, steady and reassuring. "Tell them the truth, Maria. Tell them we have military escort to assist with our emergency landing. Tell them we're doing everything right, following every procedure, and that I'm going to get us on the ground safely." "Do you really believe that, Captain?" There was a pause. "Yes, Maria, I do. I've faced worse odds and come out the other side. These people are going home today." Maria hung up the phone, squared her shoulders, and walked back into the cabin wearing a confident smile she didn't quite feel. But she'd heard something in Captain Chen's voice, an absolute, unwavering certainty that somehow made the impossible seem possible. Back in the cockpit, Sarah was running calculations in her head. Fuel weight, descent rate, distance to Lincoln, approach speed, touchdown zone. Every variable mattered. Every decision could be the difference between walking away and disaster. Thunder 1, Transcon 2847. I'm beginning my descent in 5 minutes. Once I start down, there's no going back. The energy management has to be perfect. Copy, Transcon. Thunder flight will be with you every foot of the way. Sarah's hands rested on the throttles, feeling the power of 4 massive turbofan engines at her fingertips. It was all she had. No hydraulics, no flight controls, just thrust and determination. And 15 years of being one of the best pilots the Navy had ever trained. She looked at Jake, ready. Jake nodded, though his face was pale. "Ready, Captain." Sarah took a deep breath and began reducing power on all 4 engines simultaneously, carefully, precisely. The nose dropped slightly. The descent began. Below them, Lincoln Airport was clearing the airspace, staging emergency vehicles, saying prayers. Above them, 2 F-35 Lightning IIs held formation, flown by 2 of America's finest pilots. And between them, a crippled Boeing 767 began its impossible journey to the ground, guided by a woman whose call sign was about to become legendary all over again. The game was on. The descent was poetry written in jet fuel and physics. Sarah had reduced all 4 throttles simultaneously, bringing the massive Boeing into a controlled descent from 35,000 feet toward Lincoln Airport, still 90 miles away. Every second required absolute concentration. The aircraft wanted to pitch down too steeply. She'd add power. It would try to roll right. She'd reduce power on the right engines, increase it on the left. It was exhausting. Her shoulders ached from tension. Sweat beaded on her forehead despite the cool cockpit air. She'd been flying this wounded aircraft for over an hour now, every moment requiring perfect attention, every second a battle against gravity and aerodynamics. Thunder 1, Transcon descending through flight level 310, rate of descent 1,000 feet per minute. Sarah's voice was still steady, but Jake could hear the strain underneath. Copy Transcon, you're looking good. Wings are level, nose attitude is about 3 degrees nose down, looking very stable considering. Hammer had moved his F-35 to a position about 200 feet off the Boeing's right wing, perfectly positioned to observe every detail of the larger aircraft. Torch had taken up station on the left side. They were like shepherds guarding a very large, very vulnerable sheep. Transcon, Thunder 1. I'm seeing your right aileron is drooping about 15 degrees lower than your left. You're compensating beautifully with thrust, but I wanted you to be aware. Copy, Thunder 1. Can you give me continuous updates on aileron positions? I need to know if they change during descent. Wilco, we'll call out any changes. The radio discipline was flawless. Short, precise, professional. Hammer found himself increasingly impressed with whoever was flying that Boeing. Carrier qualified, over 800 traps, and now flying a crippled jetliner with the kind of precision he'd expect from a fellow fighter pilot. Inside the cabin, the mood had shifted from panic to something else, a strange, tense calm. The passengers could feel the descent, could see the fighter jets holding formation outside their windows like guardian angels. They didn't know what was going to happen, but somehow the presence of those military aircraft was reassuring. The soccer team's coach, Miguel Torres, had his phone out recording video of the F-35s. If they survived this, when they survived this, he corrected himself. This would be a story these kids would tell for the rest of their lives. Little Emily Richardson had fallen asleep against her mother's shoulder, exhausted from crying. Jennifer stroked her daughter's hair and watched the farmland below getting slowly, inexorably closer. They were descending. Soon they'd be attempting to land. She closed her eyes and prayed harder than she'd ever prayed in her life. Transcon 2847, Thunder 1. Lincoln Airport is now 50 miles ahead, bearing 045 degrees. Weather is clear, winds light and variable. Runway 36 is cleared for your approach. You've got 12,900 feet of concrete waiting for you. Roger, Thunder 1, beginning turn to final approach heading. This was the moment Sarah had been dreading. Turning the aircraft meant asymmetric thrust, meant risking a roll she might not be able to control. But there was no choice. She had to line up with the runway. Thunder Flight, I'm starting a right turn to heading 045. Call out any excessive roll or attitude changes. Sarah reduced power on the left engines, increased it on the right. The Boeing's nose began to swing right, painfully slowly. The aircraft started rolling right with the turn, the angle increasing. Right bank angle 10 degrees, 15 degrees, 20 degrees. Too much. Sarah adjusted, reducing the differential. The roll rate slowed, but the aircraft was still turning. 30 seconds of careful power management, fighting every instinct to use the useless control yoke, flying purely by feel and throttle. Wings coming back level. You're through the turn heading 045. Beautifully done, Transcon. Sarah exhaled a breath she didn't know she'd been holding. Thunder 1, status check on all flight surfaces. Transcon, your ailerons are still drooping asymmetrically. Elevators are in near-neutral position. Rudder is offset about 5 degrees left. But you're maintaining heading and altitude perfectly. Whatever you're doing, it's working. The stress was building. Sarah could feel it in her chest, in her trembling hands. She'd been holding this aircraft together through sheer force of will for over 90 minutes. Her concentration was starting to fragment, her mind beginning to show cracks. Thunder Flight, I'm beginning final descent. Descending through 10,000 feet, reducing speed to approach configuration. Sarah pulled all 4 throttles back equally, feeling the aircraft's nose drop. The descent steepened. She needed to manage this perfectly. Too steep and they'd build up too much speed, too shallow and they'd never reach the runway. The farmland below was taking on detail now. She could see individual houses, roads, the distinctive checkerboard of Nebraska agriculture. Lincoln Airport was visible ahead, a thin gray line that was her only hope of salvation. Thunder 1, I need you to call out my altitude, sync rate, and alignment continuously now. I'm going to be task-saturated managing the throttles. Roger that, Trans. And then it happened. A sudden wind shear hit them, invisible, unexpected. The aircraft rolled hard left, the nose pitching up. Sarah's hands flew across the throttles, fighting it, her mind processing 1,000 calculations per second. Power to the right engines, reduce the left, pitch forward with all 4. Damn it, the word burst from her lips as she fought the aircraft. Thunder flight, Viper is correcting, stand by. Radio silence. Complete absolute silence. Sarah's brain caught up with her mouth half a second too late. Her stress, her exhaustion, her complete immersion in the life-or-death struggle had caused her to revert, to slip back into the identity she'd worn for 15 years. Viper. She'd just used her call sign. In the F-35, Hammer's eyes went wide. His finger froze over the transmit button. Did she just say? Torch's voice came over the tactical frequency, stunned. Say again your call sign, Hammer transmitted, his voice tight with sudden intensity. Sarah closed her eyes briefly, knowing the cat was out of the bag. Disregard, Thunder 1. Transcon 2847 is correcting too. Negative, Hammer interrupted, excitement and awe flooding his voice. Did you just say Viper, as in call sign Viper? The pause stretched for 3 seconds that felt like an eternity. Affirmative, Thunder 1, call sign Viper. Sarah's voice was quiet, almost embarrassed. Torch's voice exploded over the radio, protocol forgotten. Hammer, Viper, the Viper. Lieutenant Commander Sarah Chen, VFA 213 Black Lions. The pilot who landed a shot-up Hornet on the Stennies with partial hydraulics in a storm. Hammer was already pulling up information on his knee board, his mind racing. He'd heard the stories. Every naval aviator had heard the stories. Viper, the pilot who'd taken battle damage over Iraq, lost most of her hydraulics and brought a 23-ton fighter jet aboard a carrier deck at night, in a storm, catching the 3-wire like it was a sunny afternoon. The landing had become legendary at tailhook conventions, was used as a case study at the Naval Strike and Air Warfare Center. Transcon, I mean Viper, this is Thunder 1. Ma'am, it is an absolute honor. Hammer's voice was filled with genuine reverence. I've studied your landing on the Stennies. They show it at Top Gun. You're a legend. Sarah felt her cheeks flush despite the crisis. Thunder 1, I appreciate that, but right now I need to focus on landing this bus. We can swap stories after everyone's safely on the ground. Roger that, ma'am. Hammer's voice had changed completely. He was no longer helping a civilian pilot in distress. He was assisting a fellow warrior, someone who'd proven herself in the crucible of combat aviation. Viper, Thunder Flight is with you all the way. You landed a Hornet with worse damage. You've got this. Torch moved her F-35 closer, precise and protective. Viper, Thunder 2, you're not alone up there. We're your wingmen now. We'll get you home. In the cockpit, Jake was staring at Sarah with something approaching worship. You landed on a carrier at night, in a storm, with battle damage. Sarah's hands never stopped moving on the throttles, still fighting the wind shear, bringing the aircraft back to stable flight. It was a long time ago, Jake. Right now, we've got work to do. But they called you a legend. They study your landing at Top Gun. Jake, Sarah's voice was sharp, cutting through his awe. Focus. I need you monitoring our approach speed and altitude. Call out any deviations. Yes, ma'am. Jake snapped to attention, suddenly understanding that he wasn't just flying with Captain Chen anymore. He was flying with Commander Viper Chen, a naval aviation legend. The radio crackled with Hammer's voice. Viper, altitude 6,000 feet, sync rate 1,000 per minute, heading 045, aligned with runway centerline. You're looking perfect. 40 miles to touchdown. Sarah's voice was pure steel now. Copy Thunder 1, all aircraft, this is Viper. We're committed now. One way or another, we're landing at Lincoln. Let's bring these people home. The legend was back. And she wasn't done yet. 20 miles from Lincoln Airport, Sarah began the most critical sequence of her life. The Boeing 767 was descending through 3,000 feet, the runway a thin gray line visible through the windscreen. Her hands ached from gripping the throttles. Her back screamed from tension. But her mind was crystal clear, focused with the intensity that only comes when everything is on the line. Thunder 1, Viper. I'm going to attempt landing gear extension. If the gear doesn't lock, we'll have no way of knowing until we touch down. Copy Viper. We'll move in close for visual inspection. Stand by. Sarah reached for the gear lever, the one control that didn't require hydraulics, relying instead on gravity and mechanical backup. She pulled it down. The familiar rumble of gear doors opening reverberated through the airframe. But would the gear actually extend? Would it lock? Without hydraulic pressure, the indicators on her panel were dark and useless. Come on, she whispered. Come on, give me 3 green. 30 seconds of agonizing uncertainty. Viper Thunder 1. I've got visual on your nose gear. It's down. Repeat, nose gear is down and appears locked. Thunder 2 has visual on your left main gear. Down and locked. Looking good, Viper. Hammer pulled his F-35 beneath the Boeing's right side, inverted, looking up at the massive aircraft's belly. It was a dangerous position but necessary. Viper, Thunder 1. Right main gear is down and locked. All 3 gear are showing down and locked. You're cleared to land. The wave of relief nearly made Sarah sob. Thank you, Thunder Flight. I owe you both a beer. Make it a case, ma'am. Thunder 1 is moving to chase position for landing. Both F-35s repositioned, hammer high and right, torch high and left, giving them perfect sight lines to observe the entire landing sequence. They'd call out everything Sarah needed to know. Viper 10 miles out, altitude 1,000 feet, sync rate 800 feet per minute. You're slightly right of centerline. Sarah adjusted power on the left engines, nudging the aircraft back toward the runway center. The ground was rushing up now. She could see cars on the roads, buildings, the emergency vehicles staged along the runway, fire trucks, ambulances, rescue equipment, all waiting for her. 5 miles, 500 feet. Sync rate looks good. Airspeed 145 knots. You're on glide slope. In the cabin, flight attendants were in their jump seats, heads down, hands braced. Maria Rodriguez said a silent prayer for the captain who'd promised to get them down safely. The passengers were absolutely silent, hands gripping armrests, watching the ground approach through windows. The soccer team held hands across the aisles, their young faces pale but brave. Emily Richardson clutched her stuffed elephant, awake now, whispering, please, please, please. 3 miles, 300 feet. Looking perfect, Viper. You've got this. Sarah could see the runway threshold now, the numbers painted on the concrete. Runway 36, just like landing on a carrier, except the carrier was stationary and 50 times longer. She'd done this 1,000 times. She could do it once more. Her world narrowed to the throttles, the windscreen, Hammer's calm voice in her headset. 2 miles, 200 feet, airspeed 135. You're a little hot but manageable. Too fast meant a longer landing roll. With no hydraulic brakes, stopping was already going to be nearly impossible. But if she slowed down too much, she'd lose control authority from the throttles. 1 mile, 100 feet. You're right on centerline, Viper. Beautiful approach. Jake watched Sarah's hands dancing across the throttles, making continuous microadjustments. She wasn't even looking at instruments anymore. She was flying by pure feel, her eyes locked on the runway, her mind processing information faster than any computer. Half mile, 50 feet, reduce power slightly. That's good, 40 feet, 30. The main wheels were 15 feet above the concrete. Sarah began pulling all 4 throttles back simultaneously, feeling for the perfect moment. 20 feet, 15, 10. The main gear kissed the runway. Hard. The impact shuddered through the airframe. A tire burst immediately, the sound like a gunshot. The aircraft bounced, airborne again for a horrible second. Stay with it, Viper. Sarah added just a touch of power, softening the second impact. The main gear hit again, this time staying down. She immediately pulled all throttles to idle and deployed the speed brakes manually, metal panels rising from the wings to create drag. The nose gear slammed down. Another tire burst. The Boeing was on the runway but traveling at 120 knots with virtually no way to stop. Sarah's right hand shoved all 4 throttles into maximum reverse thrust. The engine screamed, roaring like wounded dragons, pushing against the aircraft's momentum. 110 knots. The runway markers were blurring past, 5,000 feet of runway used. 100 knots. Sarah stood on the rudder pedals, using differential braking even though the hydraulics were dead, hopping for any friction, any resistance. 7,000 feet of runway used. 90 knots. The end of the runway was visible now. Beyond it, grass, then a drainage ditch, then destruction. 9,000 feet. 80 knots. Come on, stop, 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 Jake was shouting. 10,000 feet of runway used. 70 knots. 11,000 feet. 60 knots. The emergency vehicles were racing alongside now, keeping pace. 12,000 feet. 50 knots. Sarah could see individual blades of grass beyond the runway threshold. 12,500 feet. 40 knots, 30, 20. The Boeing 767 rolled to a complete stop, with 1,200 feet of runway remaining. For 3 seconds nobody moved, nobody breathed. Then the cockpit erupted. You did it, Jake was screaming, tears streaming down his face. Oh my God, you did it. Sarah slumped back in her seat, her entire body shaking uncontrollably. Her hands wouldn't let go of the throttles. She had to consciously force her fingers to release them. In the cabin, the silence shattered into chaos. People were crying, screaming, hugging strangers. The soccer team erupted in cheers. Emily Richardson burst into tears, burying her face in her mother's shoulder. Jennifer Richardson sobbed, clutching her daughter, whispering, "Thank you, thank you, thank you," over and over. Maria Rodriguez keyed the PA with shaking hands. "Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Lincoln, Nebraska. Please remain seated while." She couldn't finish. Her voice broke and she simply wept. Outside, Hammer and Torch screamed their triumph over the tactical frequency. "Yeah, that's how it's done. Viper, that was incredible." Hammer pulled his F-35 into a victory roll, completely against regulations, completely worth it. The emergency vehicles surrounded the aircraft, but there was no fire, no catastrophe. Just a wounded airplane and 170 souls who were alive because of one woman's skill, courage, and 15 years of training for the impossible. Sarah reached for the PA microphone, her hand still trembling. "Ladies and gentlemen, this is Captain Chen. On behalf of the entire crew, welcome to Lincoln. I apologize for the rough landing. Please remain seated while we prepare for evacuation." Her voice was steady, professional, calm. Then she put down the microphone, put her head in her hands, and finally let herself shake. Jake put his hand on her shoulder. Captain, Commander, Viper, whatever I should call you. That was the greatest flying I'll ever witness in my entire life." Sarah looked up at him, tears on her cheeks, and smiled. "Call me Sarah, and Jake. We're both going to need therapy after this." They laughed, the kind of slightly hysterical laughter that comes after impossible stress, and outside the window, 164 passengers prepared to walk away from an aircraft that should have been a tomb. All because legends don't retire. They just change aircraft. The evacuation slides deployed with a hiss of compressed air. One by one, passengers slid down onto the concrete runway of Lincoln Airport, many collapsing to their knees and kissing the ground. Others stood in shocked silence, unable to believe they were alive. The soccer team emerged as a tight group, the kids clinging to their coach, all of them crying and laughing simultaneously. Emergency responders moved through the crowd, checking for injuries. Miraculously, aside from some bruises, twisted ankles from the slides, and psychological trauma that would require years of processing, everyone was whole. 170 souls had walked away from the impossible. Sarah remained in the cockpit for several minutes after the last passenger evacuated. She needed the silence, needed a moment to process what had just happened. Her hands still trembled. Her shoulders ached. She felt like she'd aged 10 years in 2 hours. "Captain," Jake's voice was gentle. "We should evacuate too. They need to inspect the aircraft." Sarah nodded slowly and stood on shaking legs. Together, they made their way through the empty cabin, past abandoned belongings, scattered magazines, oxygen masks still dangling from the ceiling. The physical evidence of terror now passed. As Sarah appeared at the forward door, still in uniform, the crowd of passengers on the tarmac erupted into applause. It started with a few people, then grew, becoming a thunderous ovation. People were cheering, crying, screaming her name. "Captain Chen, Captain Chen." Sarah descended the stairs, overwhelmed by the emotion. Immediately, she was mobbed. Passengers surrounded her, trying to hug her, shake her hand, thank her. A middle-aged businessman dropped to his knees before her, sobbing his gratitude. Mothers pressed their children forward to meet the woman who'd saved them. The soccer team pushed through the crowd. 12 kids and their coach, all talking at once, telling her she was a hero, that she was the coolest person they'd ever met, that they wanted to be pilots just like her. Little Emily Richardson broke through, still clutching her stuffed elephant. She wrapped her arms around Sarah's legs. "You saved my mommy." Sarah knelt down, tears streaming freely now. "You were so brave, Emily, you and your elephant both." Jennifer Richardson pulled Sarah into a fierce hug. Thank you for my daughter's life, thank you for everything." The sound of jet engines made everyone look up. The 2 F-35s were making a low pass over the runway, a salute. Then they pulled up hard, climbing into the perfect blue Nebraska sky, leaving twin contrails that formed a victory arch above the airport. 10 minutes later, a staff car pulled up. Major David Hammer, Thornton, and Captain Lisa Torch Williams climbed out, still in their flight suits. They walked directly to Sarah, who was surrounded by paramedics checking her vital signs. Both pilots came to attention and rendered crisp salutes. "Commander Chen," Hammer said formally, "permission to shake your hand." Sarah stood and returned the salute, then grabbed Hammer's hand. "Permission granted, and thank you, both of you. I couldn't have done it without your eyes and your voices." "Ma'am," Torch said, emotion thick in her voice, "we just watched a master class in aviation. What you did today. They're going to study this for decades. That was flying in its purest form." Hammer nodded. "When I was at Top Gun, they showed us footage of your carrier landing. We thought that was incredible, but this," he gestured at the wounded Boeing behind them. "This was something else entirely. 170 lives, Commander. You saved every single one." A news helicopter had arrived, cameras filming everything. Within an hour, the footage was trending worldwide. "Miracle at Lincoln," the headlines proclaimed. Former fighter pilot saves 170 lives in impossible landing. Call sign Viper strikes again. Sarah's old squadron, VFA 213 Black Lions, called within 2 hours. Her former commanding officer, now an admiral, spoke with tears in his voice. "Viper, you made us proud today. The whole Navy is proud. Welcome back to the family." Transcontinental Airlines CEO held a press conference, praising Sarah's extraordinary skill and courage under pressure. The FAA announced they would be analyzing her techniques. The NTSB declared her landing one of the most remarkable feats of airmanship in aviation history. But the moment that mattered most to Sarah came 3 days later. She'd returned to Los Angeles, physically exhausted but mentally unable to rest. The airline had offered her time off, months if she needed it, but Sarah found herself at the airport anyway, preparing for a routine flight to Seattle. Jake met her at the gate, his face breaking into a huge smile. "Captain, you're back already." "Couldn't stay away," Sarah admitted. "Besides, I promised you I'd be at your wedding next month. Can't do that if I'm hiding at home." As passengers boarded Flight 1247, many recognized her. Some asked for photos. Others simply nodded with profound respect. A teenage girl stopped, staring at Sarah with wide eyes. "Are you Captain Chen, the pilot who saved all those people?" Sarah smiled. "I am." "I want to be a pilot because of you," the girl said shyly. "My dad always said girls shouldn't fly planes, but you showed everyone what women can do." Sarah's heart swelled. "What's your name?" "Ashley." "Well, Ashley, your dad is wrong. You can fly anything you want, fighters, airliners, helicopters, anything. Don't let anyone tell you different. The sky doesn't care about your gender. It only cares about your skill and determination." Ashley nodded, eyes shining, and continued to her seat. Later, at cruising altitude, Sarah looked out at the clouds below. Her hands rested lightly on the control yoke, fully functional hydraulics today, thank God. Everything was normal, routine, perfect. But she was different now. The world knew who she really was. Call sign Viper wasn't a secret anymore. A local high school had invited her to speak at their career day. A documentary crew wanted to film her story. The Smithsonian requested her uniform for their aviation collection. She'd become what she'd tried to avoid, famous, recognized, a symbol. But watching Ashley walk to her seat, seeing the hope in that young girl's eyes, Sarah realized something important. Being a legend wasn't about ego or fame. It was about showing others what was possible, about proving that with skill, training, and determination, you could overcome the impossible. She'd saved 170 lives at 30,000 feet. But maybe, just maybe, she'd inspired thousands more on the ground. Sarah Chen, call sign Viper, smiled and radioed air traffic control. Los Angeles Center, Transcon 1247, flight level 370, smooth ride, beautiful day for flying. Some legends never die. They just keep flying.